Hello and welcome to Politics. The debate in France about the burqa is back. It feels like it's been going on forever, and it has been the news for nearly a year now, since President Sarkozy declared last summer that, quote, the burqa was not welcome on French soil. Well, last week, the president put it back at the top of the agenda when he announced that he wanted to create a law, or at least proposed to create a law, that would completely ban in France the full facial veil, or what's often called the burqa. The controversy has been reignited. Is the law good for women or not? Does it stigmatize Muslims? Does it make the country safer? And now another incident has come to feed the flames. Last week, a woman was stopped and fined for driving with a full facial veil. It then emerged that this woman's husband, an Algerian-born Muslim who is now a naturalized French citizen, was possibly practicing polygamy and even fraud by collecting on child benefits for each of his multiple female partners. The Minister of the Interior, who's close to the president, Brice Hortefeux, is now suggesting that his French nationality should be taken away. It's now a stickier issue than ever. But ultimately, the debate keeps on coming back to the bigger question of whether a burqa law is good for France or not. Is France a country where Muslim women can wear veils, or is France a country that bans them? Well, with me here today to discuss all of this is, to my right, Donald Morrison, contributor to Time magazine, based here in France. To my left, Benjamin Orcar, who is the president of the UMP's youth movement here in France. Again, to my right is Mohamed Ali Andraoui, who is the lecturer and researcher at the Institute of Political Studies here in Paris. And joining us via satellite from Beirut is Amel Boubekeur, who is associate scholar at the Carnegie Middle East Center. So, hi. I'd like to start bigger picture. Welcome to you all, first of all, and ask the tough questions. And I'd like to direct this question actually to Amel, to get you in on the conversation right away. You know, we talk a lot about Republican values and French values. How does this law, or how does the burqa, the veil, offend French values, do you think?
Well, first we have to focus on who they are. I mean, who are we talking about? If we are talking about the specific case that has been in the news the whole week, we are talking, of course, about an anecdotal case. If we are talking about the rising rejection of French values, or let's say Republican values, by a rising number of young Muslims, I mean, that's a fact. There's more and more young Muslims in Europe, not just in France, that are rejecting not French values as such, or Republican values, but much more what France is offering to them. So that's one thing. And also,
well, actually, so there are some of these French youth, French Muslims who are rejecting French values. But what about the question of the veil itself? Does the veil offend French values in and of itself?
Well, the terms of the debates have changed. If you go back to 2004, the real problem was that the school had to be neutral. That was quite understood by the majority of Muslims.
Right. This is the 2004 debate, which was not about the full facial veil. It was about the headscarf.
Exactly. Then, by early 2009, President Sarkozy has said that the niqab or the burqa, whatever, was against women's rights and the view that France has about women's values. But the thing, we are obliged to see and to say that nothing has been done in terms of anti-discrimination of Muslim women or empowerment of these Muslim women. So, the feeling among Muslims is that, of course, they believe and they are faithful to French and Republican values, but there's a feeling of double standard. And when it comes to remembering Muslims about their duties, I mean, the Republic is quite sometimes aggressive, but when it comes to Muslims' rights in France, the feeling among the Muslim community is that the Republic is not really doing his job.
Okay. So, you know, in some ways you're reversing the question and saying, well, maybe the veil offends French values, but right now French values aren't really honoring the Muslims, especially the Muslims who are veiled. Let me bring in Benjamin Orcar on this question. You know, the veil, there's a law to ban it entirely because it allegedly offends French values, does it?
I think that you just said that, I mean, you asked the question, but you said maybe the fact that we ban the veil would be a discrimination against Muslims. Our view of French Republic is not a view of communitarism, it's a view of a unique republic and a unique national community. And we have to be very strong on these values. And that's the very role of politics. Of course, the law we are passing will be hard to implement. We know that, but the very role of politics right now is to give some milestone in our present-day society, and in this very case, is to say no to the niqab, and it's not a question of immigration or religion; it's a question of politics, because the niqab is the expression of an integrism of a small Muslim part, Salafist part, Muslim brothers. So we have to be very strong on that, and I think that it's very dangerous to say, we are stigmatizing a few parts of the Muslim community. It's not true, because if you say that, you are in the side of the fear, of the resignation. I'm not in this side.
So you're actually rephrasing entirely and saying, well, this isn't necessarily a law that's banning the veil because it offends French values. You're saying we're banning the veil because it's dangerous for France.
Of course, yeah, it is. I mean, it's both, but because if you attack French values, of course, it's dangerous for for the French Republic. So I'm rephrasing it, but the same idea.
Can I intervene here for a second? I'm Don Morrison from Time, and we've not met, but I still disagree with what you say. Are you saying that France is returning to the practices of barely 50, 60 years ago, when it required a certain ethnic group to wear a yellow star because that group was deemed to be dangerous for the social order?
You should not use such examples. You should not use this example. It's the case of the Socialist Party in France. As soon as they don't have any ideas, they speak of fascism. I just say one thing.
It is the question of stigmatizing. Does this law stigmatize?
No, of course not. If you don't protect these women, if you don't do anything to protect French Republic, you do stigmatize. I just want to say, to finish one thing, the very example of Nantes is not an anecdotal example, as Amel said. It's something expected by the extremist Muslim people. Why? Because by chance, there is a press conference on Friday. By chance, Tariq Ramadan, who is known to support the lapidation of women, arrives in Nantes, or by chance, because he does not go to Nantes every day. So I just say that the Republic is under attack, and we have to be very strong on our values, in spite of any debate you must have. But don't use stupid examples of history.
Exactly the language that your predecessors on the right used in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And by the way, in the 1870s and 80s, before the Dreyfus
But by
affair.
chance for you, unfortunately for you, I'm from the Jewish community, and you should not say stupid things about that. You should not mix any both of case. In one case, we protect the French Republic. In another case, there were racism and Holocaust. But you know the difference between the debate between the US and France? In France, secularism is protected, not in the US. And it's the same thing about the freedom of speech.
In
France,
right. In the US, we have freedom.
You cannot say, because for instance, in the US, you could say that Holocaust did not happen. It's not the case in France, and I do like that.
In the US, we have freedom of religion.
Let's bring it back.
You have freedom from religion.
Please, I would like to.
Sure. In fact, let's bring it back a little bit to the question that both of you seem to be getting around, and I know that ML wants to get in there too. It's the issue of security and that argument.
Well, actually, I tend to agree with Amel, because there is another stigmatization of the Muslim community in France, in my view. And for example, I'm sorry, I disagree with you, because Salafism are not the most of the Salafi women do not wear the niqab, and the Muslim brother women, they don't absolutely wear the niqab. So there is a mistake. I'm sorry to say it.
Somewhere.
So no, but you have something like.
I can comment on that.
Not more than 2,000 women wearing the niqab in France.
In just a second. Go ahead and finish.
For example, so you are. It's very easy to say that we are facing a bigger and bigger extremist wave in France. That's a lot more complex than that. For example, you say that the husband, the man who is practicing polygamy in Nantes, he's from the Tabligh movement. And Tabligh is known as being a founding member of DCFCM, the French Council for the Muslim Faith. We have Tabligh members, so it's a lot more complex than that. For example, you say about Tariq Ramadan, but his conference was he was supposed to be in Nantes for weeks, and he was announced in Nantes for weeks or for months. So it hasn't. It has nothing to do with this this
what
case.
I see is that Tariq Ramadan used this case to express his ideas,
well, he's an
intellectual,
and we know, he make a point. So.
But we know that the CFCM
I might want to stop you on that argument, because Tariq Ramadan is a big player in France in terms of the study of Islam and various concepts and politics of Islam. Amel, I think you wanted to comment on something that Mohammed Ali was saying.
Yeah, I wanted to comment actually on the motivations of these women and these men who are supposedly belonging to the Salafism or to Tabligh. First, Tabligh has been present in France for 40 years, so that's not a quite new movement or something that became certainly more dangerous than it was. That's one thing. And as Mohammed underlined it, exactly, the niqab is not something related only to these two groups. Now you have the media who have put the light on these two groups, but that's much more complex than that. I think the main mistake that political parties, and especially the UMP, is making in understanding of conceiving this trait as an external trait, has external movements threatening the Republic and brainwashing French Muslims. And that's not how it is happening on the ground. These interpretations are made by French Muslims, and they are made by French Muslims who actually are suffering from a lack of resource, from a lack of access to alternative resources on what Islam is, on what the Quran is really saying about the niqab. So that's a real problem. Indeed, that's a real problem. But that's the problem.
Ahmed,
the problem is not about
let me see if I can
radical movements or not.
Let me see if I can just sum you up a little bit. It seems like you're saying, okay, this argument is about security, and it's about, in some ways, defending France from what could become an internal menace. But you're saying, wait, hold on. The whole interpretation of what is dangerous is a little bit wrong. And that leads me to my next question, which maybe Mohammed Ali, you could start with answering. This is a law that's been much debated in France, and that it's been about a year. But this isn't the only place where it's being debated. It's also being debated in the Arab world. How does a law banning the full veil? How does that play out in the Arab world? How is that viewed?
Well, actually, not only in the Arab world, but also in other Western countries like the United States, there is kind of misunderstanding between what's going on in France, not only in France, but in some European countries like Belgium, like France, and other, because we have to know that, so it makes no doubt that France is going a severe identity crisis. Politicians, they have no real results on the economic scale, on the social scale, and so we are dealing mainly and more with societal issues. So we have to deal with symbols when we don't have no more to do and no more result to get in the economic issues or in the social issues. So that's the point. In the Arab world, it's another point, because we have Arab societies. Most of them are not democratic societies. So religious symbols are handled in order to create some diversion. So it's a lot more complex. And for example, it seems to be a bit funny, but for example, Nicolas Sarkozy, who says that in France, the niqab has no right to be, has traveled in Saudi Arabia in 2007, and he said that, it's very funny, he said that Islam practiced in Saudi Arabia is a very moderate Islam. So when you know that the niqab comes from Saudi Arabia, and you say that niqab has no right to be in France, it's very funny. So.
Right, it does seem like a paradox, but Benjamin, you wanted to get in.
No, first, it's very strange to me when I see some experts saying that the debate is unuseful, because I don't know why you are here on TV if you think that this debate is a societal debate.